something that was a logistical nightmare, but something that the Defense Force officers, by their training and by their bent, would logically be asked to assist in. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, I think we would all concede in this chamber that we saw it as a dry run, in fact, for the kind of thing that a Defense Force might have to do if Barbados was ever hit in a very significant way by any storm or hurricane. But we also see the Barbados Defense Force operating jointly with the Royal Barbados Police Force in their joint patrols. In fact, the Governor General, every 6 months, renews a special kind of warrant so as to permit the Barbados Defense Force to work alongside the Royal Barbados Police Force to support the work of the Royal Barbados Police Force. But we also see the gentle hand of the Barbados Defense Force in our Cadet Corps. And Barbados has had a fine tradition of cadets dating back many, many decades. I was not a cadet myself, but I remember standing in awe at Combermere School as the Combermere Cadets. I think it was the number 3 company. the number 3 company. But the only company to have a band, and the only company to have produced chiefs of staff. So perhaps number 3. Perhaps number 3.
I remember do not be distracted by the asides.
Sir, but that fine institution, sir, has provided leadership skills to many, many, many Barbadians. And the Cadet Corps continues to serve Barbados well. Its face has changed, but the Defense Force continues to provide an avenue for many, many young people to stay out of trouble, to learn skills, to have the spirit of discipline inculcated in them, and also to provide future members for that very organization. And in more recent times, Mr. Speaker, the Barbados Defense Force helped to give birth to our, what's it called? The 1,000 young people. The Youth Advance scheme, the Youth Advance score. So as to provide similar skills to our young men and women who might not normally be inclined to such activity. The institution, Mr. Speaker, has undoubtedly served us well. We enjoy their parades, we enjoy their music, and sometimes we even enjoy, Mr. Speaker, their hospitality. You know, there were times when people wondered what was the benefit of having a defense force. Does Barbados need an army? What war are we going to fight at any time? And we had the famous song, Boots, Boots, Boots and More Boots. But Mr. Speaker, history, I think, has demonstrated that that organization is a solid and worthwhile investment for a not insignificant share of our national resources, and it continues to serve us well. But every institution, Mr. Speaker, has to go through changes in leadership, changes in management. And sometimes one of the challenges of organizations that are so steeped in tradition is that they hold on to those traditions for their life without recognizing the need to change. Now, I'm not suggesting that the BDF is hidebound by tradition and does not change. In fact, sir, the BDF has made significant investments in developing resources in cybercrime and modern things. The BDF has the only hyperbaric chamber in Barbados. In fact, I believe in the Eastern Caribbean, there are two. They have two. Two in Barbados, but BDF has one. The BDF has its own hospital, and it now has a field hospital that we were able to deploy to assist during COVID. Mr. Speaker, the BDF has its own ambulance service, its own medical team, and Mr. Speaker, it even has its own jail that from time to time we've had to consider drawing on the facility when we've had challenges otherwise. The Barbados Defense Force, some years ago, we spent, I think, I don't remember the figure, but it was many, many millions of dollars equipping the Coast Guard with offshore patrol vessels. I remember we did that towards the end of our last tenure in government, so as to be able to assist in maritime operations, but also in dealing with drug interdiction, helping to keep our fisher folk safe, helping to patrol our territorial waters and to preserve our marine heritage. And many of those officers many of those individuals in the Coast Guard have gone on to work in marine industries because of the skills that they inculcated. So yes, Mr. Speaker, an organization of great tradition, first the Barbados Regiment, then the Defense Force. It's an organization that has served us well. Mr. Speaker, but it is an organization that is in many respects, in some respects you could say that it is ahead of the time, but in other respects, a little bit mysterious. It is not commonly known, Mr. Speaker, that the BDF has a peculiar retirement arrangement. And let me set it out so that members of the public will understand the context of this bill. For officers of the BDF, a person at the rank of colonel or higher must retire at the age of 55. So if I were a colonel in the BDF, I would have been retired by now. I hope nobody wants to bring those rules into retirement for politicians, because half of this chamber would probably be empty. And an individual who reaches the age of 50 and is at the rank of lieutenant colonel, he must retire at the age of 50. And a major must retire at 47, and a captain or lower rank must retire at 45. So when you look at the parade square on Independence Day, all of the ranks of the enlisted men, not the officers, you can tell the officers because I think they're the ones who have the sword, but the ones who are swordless, sir, the enlisted men and women, every single one of them must retire at the age of 45. Now, in many respects, that has been a good thing, because at the age of 45, I believe they get a cash gratuity. By then, they would have, I expect, amassed a tremendous wealth of skills, and those skills then go on to serve Barbados well in other areas, and that is a laudable thing. But the truth is, this age of compulsory requirement, capped at 55, and I will say, Mr. Speaker, that there's a possibility for the Chief of Staff, and I think probably one or two of the other ranks, can get an extension. So you can be extended, I think, by up to another 2 or 3 years. But that apart, individuals who still have a lot to offer find that they reach a particular point and then they must go. Now, Mr. Speaker, we are not, let me make it clear, we are not changing this specific arrangement. But I did say that the BDF was mysterious, so let me pare back the layers and go a little further. When a person reaches retirement age, Mr. Speaker, they can go into the reserves. But a strange thing has been happening in Barbados. Individuals have been treated as if they were reserves, when in truth and in fact the law did not allow. So individuals have been accorded certain ranks and privilege and so on post the age of 55 in circumstances where the law simply did not allow for it. And at 55, you had to leave the second class of reserves if you were a reserve. And a person of the rank of colonel could not go into the reserves. When you reached that age, there was no basis or there was no legal opportunity for you to remain within the outer fold of the BDF so as to be able to continue to provide services. And it has created a tremendous anomaly. But it goes further, sir. One of the finest military officers of this country, of the University of Waterford, I won't call his name, sir. I don't think I'm allowed to call his name in the chamber. Became chief of staff at the age of 59. Age of 59. And served, I believe, until the age of 64. Unfortunately, this was not noticed. And in truth and in fact, what was a period of great success under that individual's leadership is now in a small way tainted by the fact that in law he could not have been appointed to the post of chief of staff. That individual I have had the benefit of being associated with at the Combermere School, and he is one of the people who we look up to even now as having been a man among men and a leader for the times. But at the time when he was appointed, he was 59, and under the BDF Act, he could not have been appointed because you can only appoint a person to be chief of staff if you are a member of the BDF. Plain and simple. And he stopped being a member of the BDF at 55. So at 59, when he was appointed to chief of staff, he was not a member of the BDF. So in law, sir, he could not have been appointed. So we find it necessary, Mr. Speaker, to do two things today. One, or maybe three. One, we feel that it is vital that we validate the appointment of that extraordinary gentleman to the post of chief of staff for that period, but also that we validate all of those things that he did or that he gave his imprimatur to when he was acting in that post. That individual would have done a host of things, signed off on a whole set of documents and so on, when he was in the post of chief of staff. But regrettably, sir, without any lawful authority so to do. So all of those things during that person's period of stellar leadership have to be validated. Now, that would include things like contracts, appointments that he made, promotions, whether temporary or whatever it is, all those things that he did have to be validated. So that's one thing that we're doing. The second thing that we're doing is to recognize that individuals past the age of 55 have tremendous worth. Now, this is really a defense debate, but it in fact has a larger context. It has a larger context, sir. Because the issue of retirement age is one that can be a little troublesome. You see, it's important for people to retire earlier so as to give the individuals serving in the lower, I don't want to say ranks, because this is not an army concept. It's a political concept too. It is a public service concept. It is a concept whether you're working in a factory, a mini mart, or whatever it is. When people move up, others are able to rise. Plain and simple. Across the entirety of human endeavor, from a palace to a church to a school. So it is important that people do have an opportunity to move off. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, what we have to recognize is that in a small state like Barbados, there is often a deficit in skills. And when we force people to move off of the scene at an early age, then we have problems. Not long ago, and by not long ago I mean during the period of the last decade, I didn't say the lost decade, but you know what I mean. There were a number of senior public servants all across the public service who took early retirement. And that deficit was keenly felt, whatever the reasons were, not the subject of debate today. But that resulting deficit was keenly felt all across the public service, and perhaps its effect is still being felt today. Perhaps it would be worthwhile pointing out that the importance of allowing people to contribute for a little longer was recognized by the Barbados Labour Party when we were last in government. And it is unfortunate that the actions that we took then were taken very shortly before the 2008 election, and was left to a subsequent administration to pursue, and not surprisingly, they did not. In 2008, Mr. Speaker, the Defense Board considered a paper which was put up by the then Chief of Staff. And that Defense Board accepted the recommendation that all members of the BDF Reserve be allowed to serve until the age of 60. So as far back as 2008, this Barbados Labour Party administration recognized the importance, sir, of giving individuals the opportunity to stay on, not in a full-time capacity, but stay on in the reserves until the age of 60. But as I said, not surprisingly, the last administration paid no interest in it, paid no heed to it, and did nothing about it. Years later, Mr. Speaker, 14, 15, well, how many years is that now? 13 years later. We are here looking at the same institution and recognizing, Mr. Speaker, that in truth and in fact, we want to do a little bit more than we were prepared to do then. And we want to enable all members of the BDF to go to the age of 65. Mr. Speaker, there is a dear lady whose name slips me, but I believe she was part of the medical corps. Yes, I'm speaking of her in glowing terms. I think Major Florence Gittings, who has retired from the BDF and retired again, and I'm told she's still in her 80s. She's in her 80s. And that wonderful lady still works in extraordinary ways with the BDF, using her special skill set. I believe we saw her, yes, I think, I'm sure we saw her at work last year and possibly even this year. Yes, during the vaccinations, that is correct. And she's in her 80s. Now, I'm not asking that we extend the reserves to 80s, but I am making the point, sir, that well past the statutory age of retirement, and this is retirement from substantive posts and also from the reservist positions, individuals in the BDF remain committed and passionate about staying on and working. Our own member of parliament for the city, as far as he was concerned, he was a reservist until the age of 60. I'm not saying that the member for the city has reached that age. I don't know the age of the member for the city. I don't want to know the age of the member for the city. But in his mind, he either did or would have continued as a reservist until the age of 60. And if you ask anybody in the BDF who had passed their 55th year, are you a member of the reserve? They would have said, of course. I am a reservist until I am 60. But the law simply did not facilitate it. So we are here, that's the second thing we're here to do, to allow us to benefit from the vastness of the experience of these fine individuals, should they desire, up until the age of 65. And there's another thing that we're here to do, sir. Back when that gentleman whom I spoke about earlier, who took over the reins at the age of 59, it was considered strategically important to the Defense Board of the time that the leadership of the BDF go in that direction. But they had no lawful authority to do it. I don't know if it was done. I can't put my head in the thinkers of that time. But as we wade through this exercise, we recognize that, we are not giving ourselves the benefit of the best of options as we look at the BDF. And so, we asked ourselves, what if we wanted to do now, or at any time in the future, what a previous defense board felt it was important to do? Unfortunately, the law wouldn't allow us to do it. And therefore, we are here today as duty number 3, or task number 3, to amend the Defense Act by inserting a new clause 169A. And it has been tabled, it is on the order paper, but for the benefit of those who join us today as the public, I want to read the amendment, sir. And I should probably begin by reading 169. So if you'll bear with me, well, let me just read 169A, and then I'll try and find 169. Notwithstanding section 169, the Governor General, acting in accordance with the advice of the Defense Board, may appoint, where the exigencies of the service so require, an officer who is over the age of 55 years but under the age of 65. But there's also rank. So let me start over. Notwithstanding Section 169 or any enactment to the contrary, the Governor General, acting in accordance with the advice of the Defense Board, may, where the exigencies of the service so require, a retired officer of the BDF who held a rank not lower than Lieutenant Colonel or the equivalent naval or Air Force rank, and who is over the age of 55 years but has not attained the age of 65. So let's break it down. First thing is that the appointments are made by the Governor General acting on the advice of the Defense Board. That's what the law is now, and that does not change. That's what the law is now, and that does not change. But we are recognizing that there may be special circumstances, and so we have the language where the exigencies of the service so require. So this is not a situation where there's business as usual. The concept of the exigencies of a particular situation requiring is language that is commonly used in law, in statutes, and in rules to describe essentially an extraordinary situation where you may have to do something that you would not ordinarily do. So in the ordinary scheme of things, Mr. Speaker, a chief of staff retires, and one of the brilliant officers serving below applies, interviews, and would be appointed. That is what happens most of the time. It hasn't happened all of the time, it happens most of the time. But we recognize that from time to time, the exigencies, the extraordinary requirements of the force, of the situation, of the times, may require that the Defense Board have further options open to it. Now, these options, sir, are not options from way out of the blue. These are not options that would say, let's bring a school teacher and make him chief of staff. These are not options that would say, let's bring somebody from Trinidad or from Guyana or Jamaica and make him chief of staff. None of those things, sir. This says that you may appoint, in those extraordinary circumstances, a retired officer of the BDF. So that's the first thing. You may appoint a retired officer of the BDF. So you can't be from the external force. You have to be somebody who is a retired officer of the BDF. You must have been immersed in its culture and its being. But you must also have held a senior rank. So you must have held a rank not lower than Lieutenant Colonel or the equivalent naval or Air Force rank. We don't have an Air Force, but my drafters have said that in the interest of completeness, they want to include the term. We don't have a Navy, but we do have a Coast Guard. And we recognize that in the military, there's an equivalency of ranks, though the titles may change. The actual name may change, but they all, if they stood together on a level playing field, they would all have the same rank. But as head sir, the BDF, the Army is mysterious. So you must have held a rank of not lower than Lieutenant Colonel or its equivalent. And you would have to be, given that you're retired, you would have to be over the age of 55, but not yet 65. Had this been the law at the time when that other individual was appointed, there would have been no problem. He would have fit this bill exactly. But it was not the law. So, Mr. Speaker, I reiterate, this is not about business as usual. This is not about the run-of-the-mill situation. This is not about the ordinary. Exigencies of the service requiring is a clear indication that there would be something out of the ordinary, extraordinary circumstances where the Defense Board may feel that it needed to have its options open. And that is essentially what this is. So, Mr. Speaker, we're not removing anything. The Governor General still makes the appointment. She still makes it on the advice of the Defense Board. So those structures are not changing, but what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, is to give the Defense Board the opportunity to consider at any point in time, in respect of the leadership, a larger category, a larger class of individuals to take the institution forward. So those are the three things that we are here to do with this amendment, sir. Let me repeat them. Firstly, to validate the appointment that took place some years ago, where the individual who was appointed could not lawfully have been appointed. Secondly, we're validating all of the actions taken by that individual, and that individual, without doubt, served the BDF with the greatest of honor. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we are extending the age of retirement of members of the BDF from the reserve. So you still retire at your normal age, but you can remain in the reserve until you are the age of 65. You don't have to go at 55 now, as the law is. And fourthly, Mr. Speaker, we are empowering the Defense Board with the opportunity to consider a larger class of individuals should the need require and should the exigencies of the situation require in terms of making an appointment of Chief of Staff. Mr. Speaker, as I said, it isn't often that this chamber will have an opportunity to debate the defense force. And that's not what is intended today either. But I do want to take the opportunity on behalf of the government and on behalf of the people that they've served to thank the members of the defense force, those present and those past, for the exemplary and extraordinary service that they have given to the state of Barbados. They have been a beacon to us. At a lower level, they have entertained us with their drill and their precision. But at a higher level, sir, they have put their lives on the line to help to safeguard Barbados and its values. Occasionally, they will receive, some of them will receive national honors for bravery. Some of them did last year, and other commendations. But the vast majority of them will receive no medal. The vast majority of them will receive no accolade other than the praise that we give them from this place. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those words, I beg to move that this bill, in its terms, but in the context of an organization that is exemplary in every way, an organization that pulls its weight and more, and an organization that is really the backstop for civil society, whether it is to help in hurricane relief, whether it is to help in a vast array of things. Sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll endeavor not to be very long. I certainly want to begin by expressing appreciation to the command and the members of the Barbados Defense Force and the Barbados Coast Guard with respect to their recent involvement in happenings of misfortune in Barbados and other parts of the Caribbean. Traditionally, we have seen the Barbados Defense Force and the Barbados Coast Guard used in our national efforts to assist our neighbors who have fallen victim to unfortunate circumstances, whether it would have been law and order related, militarily related, or emanating from disaster, natural disaster impact. That has happened historically, and the men and women wearing the national colors of Barbados in uniform have done us a tremendous credit in how they have acquitted themselves in these jurisdictions overseas on those instances. They've done the same at home, and recently with the issue we had relative to distribution of care packages or food vouchers or groceries, whatever label you want to put to that exercise. I think to some extent also in the wake of the volcanic ash fall on Barbados, we have seen the Barbados forces at work in lending the kind of service to the national community that would have been desired at that time. And they worked very hard and energetically in long hours to get a job done in not the best of circumstances, and also themselves not necessarily having been equipped with a sufficiency of resources. So I want to begin by appreciating the work of our servicemen and women in that regard. So I want, therefore, Mr. Speaker, further to be understood when I express that we exercise some caution with respect to the use of the Defense Force on ground and in civilian exercises in Barbados. This is not an assault on the government for how they've handled recent crises. This is not an attack on the Defense Force in terms of how its men and women have been deployed. I'm simply saying that sometimes there can be a very thin line between military duties and a military function and military role and providing humanitarian assistance and service in times of crises. If it happens too often by force of circumstance, there's always the danger that it becomes quite an accepted thing that the actions and functions and presence of the military personnel are so familiarly seen and regularly engaged that it becomes an accepted part and parcel of normal life. And I don't think that it is, and I don't think that it is intended or even hoped to be. And while I commend and credit them for the service they provide to our nation and to other countries about us, I also ask that we be cautious as a government and as a people in terms of how we manage that sort of intervention by military forces in everyday civilian matters, because we do not want to cross the line. We salute the efforts over time, and especially are appreciative of it now when the Defense Force is available to supplement the efforts of the Royal Barbados Police Force, a force which by admission is depleted by some 200 members and possibly depleted in terms of resources, and that we can rely upon a disciplined force under approved circumstances to assist the regular constabulary is, I think, a positive for Barbados, and especially in these times when the peace and tranquility of the land would be threatened by those who have ill intentions or not the best interests of others or of the country at heart. Whatever we do as a people, whatever we do as a government to address deficiencies or loopholes in the legislation with respect to the management, the command, the operation of our military forces, whatever we do, we must try to ensure that it positively, in fact, serves to bring about such improvement that we seek such improvement that is necessary. We face a big threat in this region. Barbados is not immune or exempted from trans-regional crime, from trafficking in arms, and from the drug element operating about us. All of these clandestine efforts that people pursue in their own interests and in their own material advancement work to the detriment of the well-being of our country. And the presence of this phenomenon does not only threaten our well-being, a sense of peace and calm, a social cohesion as a community, making us attractive to the world, but of course they threaten order, they threaten the social claim that we prefer, to which we're accustomed. They threaten our developmental gains earned through hard work of many over time. They threaten our very democracy and our system of government. And whatever we do, therefore, I'm suggesting, Mr. Speaker, we have to ensure that it is done towards these ends, and that whatever we do is adequate to serve those ends, that we make the force a better entity that can help us to withstand in the face of these threats to our democracy and our development and our social disposition as a jurisdiction and as a people. I want to urge that we treat to the well-being of our service people in a better fashion. I'm not going to go into a lot of debate and argument today. This is a general call. We have to treat our workers better in Barbados, but we have to treat our service people better, whether it be the military, Coast Guard, the Defense Force, whether it be the police officers. We have to make sure that our service people in various sectors across this country are treated in a better fashion. That not only applies to remuneration, but it applies to other wholesome considerations. It does not take us long to imagine what people are facing and what people would need and how we can treat to giving them a better sense of well-being. And I think we need to make sure this I have spoken about before with reference to how police officers are remunerated in Barbados. I still repeat the call that they need to be better remunerated, but of course there are other considerations as well. And I was not encouraged at all by what I saw recently exposed in our media, that in terms of disability benefits, in terms of insurance coverage for our officers in the police force in line of their duty in driving sometimes at urgent and emergent speeds, police vehicles, that there's no insurance coverage. I was a bit taken aback to see that we are still in 2021. If that is true at that place, we have to do a better job in treating to our service people in the police force, in the military, in every which way. And that does not only apply to remuneration, but it applies to other considerations as well. And persons who are brought to a place of disability while serving this country should not be abandoned, neglected, or forsaken, certainly should not be forgotten. And I urge that these things be treated with some immediacy. In Section 9, and I am a layperson, not a lawyer, but I perhaps, maybe in this close-up, the Honorable Attorney General Member St. Joseph could address. I was trying to read in the Defense Act, and I hope I have the right section of Cap 159 and Section 9, where the authority for giving directives to the Defense Force is reposed in the power of the Office of the Governor General. Section 9 also goes on to say, whereas the Governor General may give directives to the Chief of Staff for operations of the Defense Force, the Prime Minister is also given authority to give directives to the Chief of Staff relative to the operations of the said force, in the absence of directives coming from the Governor General. Don't know the intention of the drafters of the law at the time. My reading of it as a layman suggests perhaps some potential for conflict or potential for abuse. And I really want to hear perhaps that matter treated to with a little bit more clarity, if not today, at some soon time. Because, as I said, as a layman, it seems to me there's potential for conflict if the authority for commanding or giving directives to the Chief of Command, the Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defense Force, if the Governor General think if the Prime Minister has something that he or she would want to see effected through use of that force, then it would be on advice to the Governor General. But the legislation, as I see it, unless I'm reading an outdated piece, says that Section 9, that authority also is given to the Prime Minister in the absence of directives from the Governor General. And that would be my contribution for this matter for today, sir.
Honourable Member Christchurch East.
Sir, I rise to contribute to the debate on the amendment to the Defense Act. Sir, we effectively looking at falling in line now with what are generally accepted views on older persons in our community. Now, I say that very, very broadly to bring it to a narrow point. When we think of an army, or we cast our minds to think of, let's say, the Royal Marines, what comes to mind is what is shown in the advertisements. Persons jumping out of a helicopter, persons with parachutes, persons rappelling down a mountain, people crawling under barbed wire, and flashbangs going off above their head. So when we think of the Navy SEALs in the States, we think of Navy SEAL Team 9 that took out Osama bin Laden, sir, and their preparation and the rigors that they went through. So for most persons, our concept or dominant thoughts when we think of an army, a navy, an air force, any armed forces, are young, active, exceedingly fit people. And for a long time, sir, that was the core function of an army or a defense force. The defense force is literally, sir, what its name suggests. It is not a force intended to go and start a war or wage a war against someone. It's a force that is intended to protect the shores and the borders of our country from foreign intruders or to preserve peace within our country when such is required. But while we look at the advertisements, sir, and we see the people jumping out the plane, and we see the persons running with these heavy machine guns, what we don't see are the persons in the background who keep it all together. What we don't see are the engineers. What we don't see are the persons who design the equipment or instruments that an army may use. What we don't see are the persons who do the IT and keep the back-end stuff running. What we don't see are the human resources personnel that manage and observe the functions inside of an armed force. An armed force, sir, or an army is effectively like a big corporation. That's what it is. You have the persons at the bottom whose task is to carry out the functions and the orders of the persons above. You have the management level, you have the directors, you have the supervisors, you have the CEO. And if we look at the structure of an army, it effectively simply follows any other organizational structure. It is different in how we apply rules. It is different in how rules are followed. It is different in some of the rights of the individuals under the command. For example, there's a rule: comply and then complain. Carry out your order and then raise your issues about it afterwards. But the bottom line function is there's no mystery. There's no mystery to the functioning of a defense force. It follows a corporate structure right up to the chief of staff, who is the effective CEO. Now, when the age limit or retirement age for the defense force or for other armies, because we followed at that time the British model, when that was contemplated, it was you had to have persons within the force who were capable of active service. So if a war broke out, these people could actually go and fight on the front lines or to do battle. We have moved a long way from that point. Even the advertisements that you now see for the armed forces overseas have no change. It is not come and train and fight and die for your country. It is come, join the army, career advancement opportunities, get an education, right? These are the benefits of it: healthcare, pension. So even what we used once upon a time to attract people to join in the armed forces has actually changed as well. So the factors which inform the retirement age of 55 no longer apply to now. Society has moved that retirement ages are being pushed back because we accept that persons can play a more productive role longer into their lives than we initially contemplated. Sir, when I was a teenager growing up, I thought 40 was old. As I passed that barrier, sir, and pelted way past it at full speed, I now believe that 50 and even 60 are young. Actually, sir, I'm thinking that 65 might be the prime. But our perspectives changed, sir. And it is true. Once upon a time in Barbados, once you got to a certain age, and the Bible itself says 70. There are many people in Barbados at 70 who are not waiting to die, but who are looking at the next venture to get into. So I saw with interest a documentary on a lady who was 100 years old. And she went to the gym every single day. Every single day. And she used to go to the gym every day, being driven by her 96-year-old sister. And that only stopped because the 96-year-old sister failed the eye test. After a certain age, you have to get the eye test every year to get your license renewed. So she couldn't drive them to the gym anymore, so some grandchild took them. But sir, that 100-year-old lady, as part of her regime, found herself at the gym every single day. Now, granted, sir, she's not prancing all over the place and doing backflips that we saw Simone Biles doing in the U.S. Olympic trials. But she was doing her part to keep herself fit. And quite frankly, sir, I felt a little bit embarrassed and ashamed. And I'm sure that some of my other colleagues in here, had they watched it, would have felt suitably ashamed and embarrassed too. Because at 100 years old, sir, her routine and regimen is something that I would probably have to gear up to and practice in quiet before inviting the cameras to see. But the point is that this is not now unusual. I went yesterday, sir. I determined yesterday I was going to start to exercise. And I found myself at the Botanical Gardens yesterday afternoon. And the amount of people that passed me walking, sir, and I was chipping along, but some people passed me walking, including two ladies together, powered past me. And I thought to myself, well, I couldn't see my mother doing this at 50. I couldn't see my mother or my parents doing this at 60. We never contemplated it. Your grandmother, sir, growing up, she said she was going to the gym. You asked her, Granny, are you going off? But right now, we accept that as normal because things have changed. In the US, they're putting laws in place to bring back on retired persons to allow them to perform a more useful function in the airports in the United States. In Miami International Airport, a decision was made that a certain amount of their workforce had to be above 65. So they took back on people, and you see older persons there cleaning or tidying or wiping down or whatnot, incorporating them because they still have a useful life. So why did I go all the way there, sir? And what does this have to do with the armed forces? We are only now following what the rest of the world has done already, sir. In the U.S. Army, officers in the Army can work up to the age of 62 in the U.S. Army. And where you are in a certain sphere, health professional officers, so the lawyers or the engineers or whatnot who are attached, they can defer or re-enlist to 65. In the UK, sir, regular soldiers can rejoin. You recontract with the UK Army. You can rejoin up to when you're 57 and serve until 60. But service personnel can also continue until 65 in specialized areas, and over that on a case-by-case basis. There was a very interesting article, sir, in the Daily Mail, the 19th of October 2020, where the Secretary, I think for Defense, says soldiers are told that they can now serve until 65, so the defense chiefs can use and lean on their expert knowledge. Specialists in intelligence gathering, engineering, and certain specialist administrative roles will be able to stay on until the normal retirement age of the civil service. And an Army source was quoted as saying, if someone wants to stay and they have a specialist skill set, why wouldn't we want them? So we look at our BDF. The role, I heard the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, sir, in his address, where he suggested that we need to be careful about blurring the lines of what the force is supposed to do. And I hear him on that point, but I also make the other point. Barbados saw the resources of the Barbados Defense Force during the COVID pandemic when Barbados was on lockdown. When we as a government needed to get assistance to the people of Barbados, and we sat down as a cabinet and we thought with other stakeholders and we thought, how can we best do this? What resources are best available to us? Which group of people are logistically the best suited, best equipped, best trained to handle what was effectively a mammoth humanitarian undertaking? We went back to the BDF, not because of their skills, sir, at defense and at offensive operations, but because we associate armies with organization and problem solving and management of disaster situations. So if you now have an army or a force that fulfills that requirement, you have to be able to staff that with people who have the competencies to do those things. Sir, experience beats a lot of things. There are things I know now that I am not any more educated in terms of book knowledge or letters behind my name than I was 25 years ago. But I can tell you that life has taught me many things. Life has taught me when to stop. It has taught me when to go. It has taught me how to weigh certain circumstances and listen to that inner voice. And some of those things come only from experience. If you think of a general, your mind goes towards Colin Powell or persons like that, Brigadier Lewis, persons with gray hair and a wealth of experience behind them. They came up through the force, they reached the pinnacle of their respective organizations, and they had that institutional knowledge that allowed them to apply that and manage the respective forces to the best of their ability and to keep them functioning. The other person, sir, that the AG referred to, he's a good friend of the AG, sir, and if the AG didn't call his name, then I won't as well, but we all know who we're talking about, right? As well, he was very well respected, not just for what he achieved or the credentials behind his name, but by his demeanor, by his experience, by his persona. He looked the part of the soldier and performed the role adequately and well up to 64. And arguably, sir, I don't think that his capacity at 64 was any less than it was at 50. So while I understand the need for us, or while I understand what previously informed the retirement age of 55 within the Army, that thought process, those modalities, they do not exist now. Sir, the other thing that we need to perhaps contemplate is, what is our position generally in Barbados with respect to aging? How do we as Barbadians see our aging population? How do we treat to them? When I was a child, I would not even put God so far from my thoughts as to unpick my teeth and talk back to somebody who was older than me. Nobody, the invisible line, sir, and the criteria was anybody of parents' age, right? But I had older parents, sir, so it was a little bit lower than that. But the point is, you would not dare talk back to somebody that has a child that had gray in their hair in a disrespectful manner, right? If your teachers at school had reason to discipline you, and you went home and complained that your teachers disciplined you, then you would get disciplined again by your parents for having embarrassed them to the point where somebody else had to discipline you. But the fact is, we respected age and what it brought. We respected the wisdom of experience. So I will actually tap myself, sir, only because I was being applauded by someone I respect significantly. Somebody I respect their wisdom, sir, their acumen, and their experience. But we laugh, but I also make the point. Out of perhaps everyone in the government, the person whose voice most makes me pause in terms of what they say, in terms of when they try to give assistance, is actually, sir, the honorable member for St. Thomas. Because she has forgotten things, sir, that I have not even learned yet. And this is no reflection on her memory or her recall. I have to be very careful, sir, with what I consider compliments, because you know how it is. But the point is, her wealth of experience and her ability to understand situations are things that I now still have to learn in certain respects. And I look upon her as an example of the right way to do things. I look upon her as an example of an elder to be respected. And I think that we as a country have drifted a far way. And a lot of it has to do in how we respond and respect those who are actually deserving of our respect by what they have done and what they continue to do in Barbados. So, while we debate this amendment legislation, while we contemplate what it means for the armed forces, while maybe we might end up having to look at something similar for the police, I don't know, I don't want to put thoughts into the AG's head, but we need to recognize that there is a sector of Barbados that was sidelined for a while, but that still has a valuable contribution to make to the landscape of Barbados and the development of our country. And we should not sideline anyone who has a contribution to make and who is competent and in a position to actually make that contribution. We talk about age discrimination, sir, this is it. The rule that currently applies with respect to the Defense Force that we are now seeking to amend, that is a perfect example of age discrimination in a sector where it is unnecessary and unwarranted. Sir, just one other thing two things, sir. Let us as well look at the functions the BDF provides in addition to the logistical support. As the AG alluded to, the BDF has a cyber intelligence unit, and we're looking at that, sir, as being an important function department of the government of Barbados, sir. That is something that young people can aspire to go into, but sir, it is also something that doesn't effectively have an age requirement on it. There's almost no exertion in doing cyber intelligence. There's no good reason that someone at 50, 60, or even 70, if they are capable and competent, should not be performing that role. So, sir, maybe in the future, we may even wish to go as far as England that considers things on a case-by-case basis, if there's a specialist skill. Sir, we all know that a number of persons, some in the legal profession, some doctors, persons who have professional skill sets, join the army, in the reserves, as doctors, engineers, lawyers, surveyors, and they are accorded a rank commensurate with their contribution to the Army. So, and those sort of persons as well, based on what the service that they provide, can do it well past the existing retirement age, and this allows us to be able to draw from a larger pool without closing the door simply on the attainment of a number. The AG, in his presentation, sir, spoke about the extension of the retirement age to 65. And while it does not actually appear in the amendment itself, that is because it's going to be the subject of regulations that will follow the passage of this piece of legislation. So, though you may not see it in the amendment bill itself or the act when it is passed or if it is passed, I haven't heard no serious objection from the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. I would say the act when it is passed. Although it is not there, that is because it will be covered and dealt with respect to the legislation. So for the ordinary persons, if you look, it says the validation section talks about those who, before this came in at 55 and extended pass and validating what they would have done there, or those who are already in it. The regulations will actually extend it so persons who are not yet 55, once the regulations are done, are not grandfathered, but they can proceed and extend their length of service to Barbados, sir, based on the regulations to follow. So having said all of that, I just want to thank the Attorney General for making wrong things right. We have come in line with the rest of the world. I want to thank the Honorable Member for St. Thomas for being the person that she is. And as an example, I might even wrap the Honorable Leader of the Opposition in here too, sir. As an example of the fact that, let us keep contributing once we're able to contribute, and that age is just a number. So with those few words, sir, I wish to entirely support this amendment and say that this, sir, is in the best interest of Barbados, and long may it be so. Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like previous speakers this morning, I would want to start my submission by commending the Defense Force for the way that they have endeavored at all times to step up to the plate, as it were, especially when this country needs them most. Well, Mr. Speaker, my submission this morning to this particular debate takes us a little past the justification that has been presented in the proposed amendments, which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, all make good sense. I wish to
Your mic needs to be turned on, Honorable Member.
I wish to draw our.
I remember you need to start because Hansard would have missed everything that you would have said.
It was
before.
just an introduction, but
Yes,
I will
but I
start
remember
over.
you would have.
I just started my submission, Mr. Speaker, by giving commendation to the Defense Force for the very outstanding work that they have done within our country, particularly stepping up to the plate at times when we needed them most. And this was expressed by previous speakers in the most recent care package distribution and so on. But in times of crisis in particular, and when our police force in particular needs the necessary support, the Defense Force is always there to do a very outstanding job, and I would want to commend them. But the submission, my brief submission to this debate, contribution to this debate, really seeks to take us past the justification that we've heard offered by the Honorable Member for St. Joseph for the proposed amendments which have been brought to us this morning. I wish to draw attention in the first instance to the very real concern that the armed forces are under-resourced and struggling to attract and retain officers. This is not only true for the Defense Force, but it is also observed in the police force. So the issues of recruitment and succession, therefore, are issues that come to the fore and raise the reasonable questions surrounding whether there is a recruitment and succession crisis that we need to be concerned with. And I use the word crisis, and I understand very well that many of us are belabored with the use of that word, especially at a time when there are so many crises presenting themselves with which we must be concerned. But it seems that the proposed amendments are being suggested at this time to address what may be classified as the perfect storm in the Defense Force, where officers are being allowed to retire at an early age when they are considered to be still mentally and physically able-bodied and having the capacity to serve, and in circumstances where there is a clear resource deficiency. One might even use the term understaffing within the armed forces. Mr. Speaker, we observe similar challenges in terms of recruitment and succession in the Royal Barbados Police Force. And of course, there's also the issue of opportunity, how opportunity is provided for those within the force to advance. I say this, Mr. Speaker, because in the force, the police force, for instance, what we see would typically mirror what we would see a lot of in Hollywood. That's enough acting. Recently, I was at a closing ceremony following a seminar which targeted the executive leadership of the Royal Barbados Police Force. And practically each senior of the near 20 people that were being presented with certificates of participation following a 2-week seminar was acting inspector, acting superintendent, acting assistant commissioner, acting. And it makes us wonder what we are really doing to not only attract the best, but retain the best, and to expect that we will get the best from among them. So, sir, I'm delighted to hear the Honorable Member for St. Joseph raise the very important point of validating men and women who are performing outstandingly in spite of being in protracted acting arrangements. I dare say, too, although some others have treaded around it, moved around it tangentially, I dare say, too, that in spite of being paid at the low levels, or levels that are less desirable than one would expect from individuals who have to fulfill the levels of responsibility that they fulfill, and who are exposed to so many different elements in their day-to-day duties. So, Mr. Speaker, this debate must not close, or I could not allow it to close, without drawing attention to the recognition that there is the need for improved remuneration of the police and indeed the outstanding men and women that serve more widely within the armed forces. This is an issue that must be addressed. We must endeavor at all times to guard against demoralization and, as I said, to give our country the opportunity to benefit from the best of the best. And among the factors that lead to this demoralization is not only pay, but making sure that our outstanding servicemen at all levels can be confirmed in their posts. If we are to find and retain the best, more than retirement age has to be addressed. More than retirement age must be a priority. It is time, perhaps, for us to move to a more comprehensive reform, a reform that gives attention to the human resources prerequisites of effective recruitment, training training people to ensure that once recruited, when the demand arises for them to step up to the plate, that they can do so and do so admirably, and to the requisite of providing opportunity and, of course, addressing the ever important issue of compensation. Mr. Speaker, sir, I recognize that the issues raised in my submission are not only a Barbados phenomenon, but there are issues that are concerning the forces in other parts of the world, where we see officials trying to pump up falling numbers by looking at how they are attracting people revisiting the retirement age, yes, but also relooking the application process to see how they can maybe waive some of the stipulations and make the application process a lot easier by making things more attractive to potentials out there. My intervention this morning, therefore, is not one that is intended to divide the House. I said at the onset that I support and I understand the rationale for the amendments proposed before us, but it is to give us cause to look beyond what we have done or what we are attempting to do in the amendments by providing able-bodied men and women with the opportunity to work past what will be a relatively young age. And I say so as a person who is equally young, considering the ages that we have been describing. But it causes us to recognize the more important need for planning effectively for the future, and recognizing that there is a requirement for a more holistic and comprehensive approach to HR planning to address the issue in the armed forces, the Royal Barbados Police Force, and more widely, the issues in the public sector. So I stand in this contribution to support the amendments, but to urge that in very short time, we move past just addressing those that were raised here this morning to look to a system that will more readily and effectively address the requirement for planning, recruitment, retention, succession, and opportunity so that we can support progression. I thank you.
Honourable for Christchurch, East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to give my support to the amendment before the chamber. Very conscious, sir, that as a reservist, technically, I couldn't allow this debate to conclude without making a contribution. And I say so, sir, because my regimental number is 9621956, sir. And I say so proudly because I know the good work that members of the reserve element of the Barbados Defence Force fulfill, supporting, sir, the full-time or the regular unit of the Defence Force. And even in the context of the COVID pandemic, I know a number of the reservists were called up, sir, and have continued to support the work of the broader force in order to ensure that Barbados is kept safe, first and foremost, as well as helping to respond to the challenges that the country has been faced with. The truth is, sir, the BDF, like all our protective forces, really is in a mode of transition, sir, and transformation. And these are some of the challenges that all of our forces will have to confront in the near future, simply because of the changing mandate that certainly they're expected to respond to. And therefore, we have to ensure that we give the appropriate support as required to be able to effect those changes. And I say so, sir, because a lot of our systems, and the honourable member for St. George North raise some of those issues in terms of resourcing. But the reality is a lot of the systems that exist, not just in the BDF, but certainly in the police force, the prison service, sir, the fire service, even customs, as part of the broad immigration, as part of the broader set of forces, are now in a mode of transformation that we hope will allow us not just to attract not just young people, but attract the talent that is required to respond to the challenges of the 21st century. And therefore, that is the path that the BDF is also on. But I say that, sir, conscious that the BDF has a very strict rank structure, sir, which, as you would appreciate, sir, you take orders and from top down and you follow those orders. But in the 21st century, sir, where the structure of some of these organizations from a capacity perspective often would find, sir, that there is some level of conflict, for lack of a better term, sir, in that some of the issues that we will confront, certainly in the 21st century, requires that the structure and the way that these organizations operate now have to, in effect, sir, to be ceded to those with the specific expertise to be able to ensure that they can effectively respond to the issues that confront the organizations. Now, I was not here for the full presentation of the Attorney General, but I heard the Honourable Member for Christchurch East refer to the Cyber Regiment. And that is an area that is certainly very exciting, but the reality is there's very limited capacity within the existing structure of the force to be able to respond to that, and therefore in recruiting and bringing in personnel to be able to deal with that, the way that the force now pivots and is able to accommodate and respond to such challenges, just like the police, just like any other disciplinary force, means that the existing structures are 20th century structures, sir, rigidly enforced. But in the 21st century, it means that those persons that you were asking to come into an organization, which is steeped in, for the most part, sir, colonial history and the way that orders are given and executed, we have to ensure that we create an environment that, in order to be effective, that those structures, yes, was important from a disciplinary perspective, that you give the space for the, what I would say, sir, the professionals, the expertise to come in and to be able to thrive in such an environment, because whilst accountability is important, I believe in the 21st century and going forward, our citizens will expect greater effectiveness from the delivery of services that entities like the BDF provides. The reality is, sir, that for most Barbadians, we really don't really think about the Army for the most part, because it's not necessarily part of our day-to-day thinking. Just like, for example, whilst persons may have more contact with the Royal Barbados Police Force by way of reporting incidents, the truth is, sir, the BDF, like the police, like the fire service, sir, like immigration, like the fire service, like customs, form part of that suite, sir, of collective services that really and truly nobody can opt out of, unless you create your own little Barbados somewhere else, or you have your own island. You really can't opt out of the services that these entities provide to the country, because these collective services are what all go towards ensuring that the safety of the country is maintained. And I really want to thank the members of the force who continue to make sacrifices, long hours away from their families, and I know that some of us in here can attest to what that feels like. But the force in a time of emergency, and certainly the reservists as they're called out and expected to respond to national crises, equally, I want to say thank you to them and their families for allowing them to be able to go and execute their duties in the name of the defense of Barbados, and to allow us to feel safe at night as we go about our business. But the truth is, sir, the transformation, both digitally as well as the internal reforms of the defense force, continues. We have been ensuring that we give the necessary financing as required. I know this is not necessarily a specific debate to get into those details, but subject to obviously the onset of COVID, we had envisaged, not just as it relates to the BDF, but certainly as it relates to the protective services, how do we ensure that the transformation to meet the challenges of the 21st century would have been met? But obviously COVID has intervened and meant that we have had to redirect significant resources to deal with the pandemic itself. We have still been able to provision for some of the very critical support services in these circumstances. And I say to the members of the force that this government will continue to make the necessary provisions to ensure that they can all meet the mandate as required. But by the same token, as we expect to be able to see the COVID pandemic subside, that we will be able to give more direct attention, not just to the resourcing as required for these entities, but certainly to ensure that on a broader level, that we're able to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And so the entire government is still committed, sir, to transformation. And I know that for the last year and a half, it has been a challenge for all the members of the force to be able to be on alert to support in the operations of under the directives that we've been operating under. It has been challenging, and I can tell you that the cost, sir, the cost of dealing with these types of responses as opposed to dealing with the transformational issues are significant. But we want to move towards a situation where we are transforming, and that the members of the force, the public, they're seeing the kind of value for money, for lack of a better term, sir, because the reality is, whilst resources can be made available, it is still up to us, the ordinary citizen, to be able to ensure that we do our part to ensure that when these officers, these men and women, ordinary Barbadians like you and I, sir, that they go, whether as part of the patrols, as part of the Coast Guard, sir, they put their lives in harm's way every time they leave the port, sir, because you never know what you may meet on the horizon. But we want to ensure that we give them our fullest support possible, sir, in order to ensure that they can carry out their duties as effectively as possible. And so I am in full support, sir, of the objective of ensuring that we can utilize all of the possible resources for as long as we can, given that we are a small open economy and we really don't have the luxury, sir. And I'll tell you, sir, I have a very good friend who is a major, and in our group chat, sir, when because I realize, sir, I'm at that age too, as the honorable member for St. George North indicated. When he said that he was retiring, he took all of us, sir, by surprise in the group chat. So we started to ask ourselves, well, how it is that a man could be retiring at 45. And so these very regulations that we're referring to here, sir, and certainly at 45, sir, we have a lot that we can still offer, I would like to imagine. And in a small society with very limited resources and without necessarily impacting succession planning, as the honorable member for St. George North indicated, I think it makes sense for us to ensure that we can do both, organize the succession planning properly, but at the same time, by the same token, being able to utilize all of the available resources that we do have. And I think that this small amendment will go a long way to ensuring that the force is able to not just retain retain persons within the context of the service of the force, but really and truly being able now to attract persons for whom, sir, I realize that and that's why I said earlier, sir, that technically I'm still a reservist, and because I could be called out. as required. But of course, but of course, I could be called out, sir. I could be called out. I could be called out. But the point is, sir, whatever small contribution that I could make, sir, to the effort, I will be happy. I'll be more than happy. I'll be more than happy to do, because the truth is, sir, that it is all about how do we utilize the very scarce resources that we do have as a country. And this transformation effort that we are undertaking broadly as government, this is going to be a very critical piece of the puzzle in terms of the utilization of skills, personnel, as well as any financial resources that we do have to ensure that the best possible service can be provided for the people of Barbados. And I believe that this particular amendment will go a long way, sir, to helping the force to better manage those very scarce resources, get some additional resources in at the reservist level from a technical perspective to be able to help meet some of the challenges of the 21st century. So whilst it appears innocuous, sir, on the surface, in reality, I believe this will go a very, 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 very long way to dealing with some of the long-standing issues that we have been confronting in the force. And so, sir, I wholeheartedly support this amendment, and I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the members of the force who have been working around the clock to support the members of the Barbados Police Force as well as the other security agencies to be able to ensure that all of us, sir, can sleep well at night. And I want to thank them and their families for their service. I thank you, sir. I'm obliged to you.
Honorable Member St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, let me thank all of the members of Parliament who participated in this debate. While we may not have labored long on the subject matter, I think that every person who contributed made very weighty and significant interventions. I would like to mention a few things. Let me thank the Minister of Home Affairs, though, for clarifying what is in my head, but what I did not articulate specifically. The regulations are being amended as an integral part and parcel of the amendment to the Act. So we're amending the Act, and that's what this chamber is doing. But the regulations are also to be amended. Now let me say this, sir. Very often, and this goes back from the very beginning of this Parliament, we would bring legislation to Parliament and promise regulations to come. These regulations have already been prepared, and I believe that they will go before Cabinet. I expect they will go before Cabinet on Thursday for approval, so that this is not a case where the regulations will lag and show up at some future point that is not known or cannot be determined. These regulations have already been drafted by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office. I have already certified them as being fit to be signed by the Minister, and therefore Cabinet just needs to give its final sign-off, and I expect that to happen on Thursday, and therefore, so long as this bill is passed in the other place and assented to by Her Excellency, then the regulations will be signed into force. The second matter that I want to mention is the query that was made by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in respect of Section 9 of the Substantive Act, which says essentially that in the absence of, which says that the Governor General has operational control of the BDF, but that in the situation where no operational directions have been given by the Governor General, then it is open to the Prime Minister so to do. I'm happy to say, sir, that in the years since 1979, when this bill was first passed, there have been no issues. But let me be candid. There are a number of things which arise on a day-to-day basis where the executive has had to give instructions to the BDF. And we spoke earlier about the distribution of food and other relief. That is a clear instance, Mr. Speaker, where the Prime Minister has, using the executive authority conferred by the Act, given an operational direction to the BDF for the safety and security of the state. And notwithstanding that it comes in the context of COVID, that COVID issue is in the context of an emergency power situation. So there are many times, Mr. Speaker, when we have in the past, and I'm likely when we will continue to pray and need the support of the BDF through a direct instruction from the executive, from the Prime Minister. There has been no challenge in the past, and the Prime Minister can only give operational directions where the Governor General has not done so. So I think that our experience shows us that there is no risk of those powers being used in a way that is negative. But if there was ever any doubt, the circumstances, because Section 9 at the end, and I can quote it, Section 9 says specifically that the Prime Minister can give to the Chief of Staff directions with respect to the operational use of the BDF in Barbados, and this is key, for the purpose of maintaining and securing public order and public safety. So, 1979 was when this bill was passed. None of us were in Parliament at the time. None of us were in the executive at the time. It has served us well. There have been no issues. And I think that we can have confidence in our systems of government and our checks and balances. There may well be a time when we may want to consider a larger review of these things, but at this point in time, I don't think we need to be unduly concerned about the way in which the BDF has been used to support the maintenance of civil society and maintenance of law and order in this country. Mr. Speaker, I thank members for their reminiscences. I thank members for their quiet admissions, but most of all, I thank members for their support of this bill, and I therefore ask that you do now leave the chair.
No, bill be read a second time.
I ask that this bill be read a second time.
Beg second.
Question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Beg to move, Mr. Speaker, that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration.
Honorable member, you have to first elect a chairman in the absence of the chairman. Temporary chairman, sir.
Beg to move that the member for St. George North be appointed as temporary chairman of committees.
Beg second.
All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The honorable member for St. George North is appointed temporary chairman of committees.
Speaker, I beg that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Beg second.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
The House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Beg second.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2. There. Mike, please. Mike.
Madam Chair, I wish to move an amendment to clause 2 to delete the words "the rank of lieutenant colonel," that's in subclause A, and replace it with the following words: a rank not lower than lieutenant colonel.
Beg second.
Beg to move that clause 2 as amended stand part.
The question is that clause 2 as amended stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
Beg second.
The question is that clause 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill as amended in committee.
Beg second.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All those honorable members as amended. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill with amendments.
Speaker begged to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Defense Amendment Act 2021.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, members of the Chamber, this brings us to the end of our business for today. And I beg to move, therefore, that we do now adjourn until Tuesday, 27th of July at 10 a.m. in the morning. Tuesday, 27th of July at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 27th day of July at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 27th day of July at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.